And we see Harut because he joined as a AUA Akopian Center. Otherwise, he would not be a panelist. He'll be an attendee. Let's give a few minutes before,
Sure.
a couple of minutes.
I saw there was another talk from somebody from Switzerland a few weeks ago. Did you, Dominic, manage to? I don't know. I don't remember the name anymore. She was also, I think, from the green bubble.
Unfortunately not. I think it was in the evening and I had personal plans.
Okay. Yeah.
But through this, Marco Moretti, I think, was the last speaker here. And before
Okay.
that, we had, her name escapes me, talking about,
Okay. So what I meant was before Marco.
Yes.
I think it was about planning or something. Yeah. Urban
Yeah,
planning, green
I think
planning.
the event that Thomas means was not part of the AUA FORACCA
Okay.
cooperation.
But I saw it on this, not of the corporation, but it was listed on the website or is listed on the website.
Aha, do you mean Stephanie's talk, maybe?
Yes. Yeah.
Ah, yeah, of course, I did join that one.
Oh, you led it, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I rather had to join it.
I don't know her. I did not know or recognize her name.
She's been at WSL for I think about 2-3 years now, but only within our team for a bit less than a year.
Okay.
Before she worked at Infras, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, the talk was very interesting, but maybe a bit too focused on Swiss cities for our Armenian colleagues. I wasn't sure.
No, I think people liked it. I think for me, the big question was, there's a lot of planning work going on. There's a lot of thinking going on around at the municipal level. And my big question was, how does this connect to the national commitments on biodiversity in terms of how does this in Switzerland, how does this global local connection work, right? How do you come from Kunming, Montreal, global biodiversity framework to national NBSAPs to local planning? And I think maybe in the case of Switzerland, my hypothesis is that's kind of very deeply embedded in the planning process. So it's not being articulated explicitly, whereas in Armenia, for instance, we're now doing stuff trying to focus on how to explicitly see the connection between these levels of commitments, So
I'm not sure about the details of this input, but I rather often see a gap between international commitments and what is happening on the ground. It's not only the case in Switzerland, but also
yeah, no, of course, yeah,
elsewhere. The
yes.
question for me, you will hear it afterwards in my talk, is always how do we get going in practice? And there is a lot of um, superordinate commitments and papers and political debate. But on the ground, our company works very much with municipalities, local actors, small companies, agriculture, forestry. They very often don't know about the superordinate commitments and things. They don't care about it.
Mhm.
They have different pressures, needs, and how to bridge this gap. This is our daily business. And it's getting tougher with climate, and also maybe biodiversity is on the rise more on this level. I heard some people say that climate change is not so much more on the top priority list of issues, but maybe beautiful flowers and nice rivers are much more appealing today for our local level. I'm not so sure. But in the end, it's always a question of the frameworks and conditions and money. And yeah, even if you think that there is much money around in Switzerland or in Western Europe, for our issues here, like nature-based solutions, which are often very complex, that does not seem to be the case in a larger scale. And that's where we are struggling.
Yeah. Give me one. I have to answer this call and then we can start. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Okay, everyone, let's get going. Welcome to the third AUA Acopian Center WSL FORACCA collaboration talks that is taking place under the umbrella of the collaboration we have with WSL and the Acopian Center with the FORACCA project initiative in Armenia. And the talk series has been very valuable for us. We've learned a lot from the Swiss experience. We've had two talks prior to this, and this one will be delivered by Dr. Thomas Probst and talking about nature-based solutions for a nature-positive economy. Dr. Probst is a co-owner of planval based in Switzerland, headquartered in Bern, a company specializing in the sustainable transformation of regions, communities, and business ecosystems, with their geographic and working scope focused on Switzerland mostly and the European Union. They have, however, been engaged to work on the FORACCA project in Armenia and bringing their know-how and their experience to the Armenian context. So Dr. Prost studies landscape architecture and planning, studied landscape architecture and planning at the Technical University of Munich, TUM. He earned his PhD in cultural geography with analysis of policy approaches for sustainable landscape development in mountain regions. So after working with for the Alpine Research Institute in Germany and the Swiss Federal Office of the Environment, he joined planval to build bridges between research policy practice. We're very happy to have you here, Dr. Probst, and look forward to your talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ellen, for this kind introduction. I'm also very happy to be here and to deliver a speech about nature-based solutions for nature-positive economy. And as Ellen already said, I'm also engaged in the FORACCA project in Armenia, and I'm happy to see Dominik Braunschweiger from WSL here also in the audience. My talk will be rather practice-oriented, but I will start with like some generic information and context about these frameworks, approaches of nature-based solutions and nature-positive economy. What you have already heard in the introduction from Ellen is about me. There are also my contact details. I think we will spread the slides afterwards so that if you have any questions, even after the discussion, please feel free to contact me. Maybe only some words about our company, planval, small company existing for a long time already. We are 15 experts in different fields like geography, climate, landscape, economics, tourism, and communication. And our core business is local and regional development with a focus on climate change and also nature and landscape. And I want to bring in some of our experiences we have in these fields here in Switzerland and beyond. And I personally think that there are quite some potential synergies with what we are doing in Switzerland and what you are working on in Armenia, be it in the frame of the FORACCA project or beyond. So the content of my speech, some background information, framework, and then the examples from projects which I know personally because I am or was working on them. And then there will be time for outlook and especially discussion. I'm very keen on hearing what you think about these issues and whether you see also potential for cooperation or project-based work in the future. So starting from the very beginning, you are all aware that we are living in a time of crisis, and we are talking here in this context especially about two specific crises, biodiversity loss and climate change, and both together are threatening health, economy, financial stability, and at the end of the day, also the ability to thrive on our planet. The question is, or a hypothesis is, that nature-based solutions can solve or help solving at least a part of the two crises. So when we have a look at climate change, the overall goal is very clear, becoming net zero. So avoiding, reducing, mitigating emissions or storing what cannot be reduced. And when we talk about biodiversity loss, there the goal can be going nature positive. So what does this mean? Both crises are interrelated, and I suppose you know the climate stripes, the graphic with going from the blue to the red, where we have the global warming, which is very clear, the signals are very clear, and the graphic below might not be known as so much to you. This was rather a prototype where researchers tried to also visualize in the same way like the climate stripes biodiversity loss, and there you see that the loss is increasing also within the last decades, as is climate change. So this kind of visualization. When we talk about biodiversity, this is a very recent piece of research or monitoring from Switzerland. The graphic is available only in German, I'm sorry. But what you see here is the state of biodiversity and the development from the year 1900 to today. And you see the different ecosystems. On the very top, there is the forest, then there is agricultural areas, then there is settlement, there is water bodies, and there is the alpine ecosystems. And you see that the development is rather bad in most of these ecosystems. You see that during the 1970s, there was, for example, water ecosystems were in a very bad quality, the dark red. Then there was some recovery because of state pressure, because of new legislation, funding programs, and a lot of projects trying to improve the quality. But in the end, if we have a look at today, the very right column, there is only the alpine ecosystems in a good state, and the rest is only in a medium or even still in a bad state. So we have a problem with biodiversity also in Switzerland. It's very clear. The other big issue, climate change. We have also a very new, very comprehensive report about climate change, state and scenarios for the future. This is a visualization. All these documents are linked in my presentation, so you can check them out afterwards. It's very clear that Switzerland is also highly affected by climate change. We have large temperature increase, we have more heat extremes, we have drier summers, The snow line is rising. We have more frequent and more intense heavy precipitation, and this will go on, which is the case in all of our countries worldwide. But we have a good database, and we know rather a lot about the interrelation between climate change and biodiversity loss. So let's go to some trials of definitions of these underlying concepts of my talk. So starting with nature-based solutions, this was first introduced by the World Bank in 2008, stating that these are approaches which try to combine climate change mitigation, adaptation, biodiversity conservation, and sustainable resource management. And that is still in the so-called official definition today of IUCN, where they say it's about protection and sustainable management of natural resources and the ecosystems. And it's very important to have benefits also for society, and underlying there's also somewhere economy. That's now the next point, nature positive. What is this? This is a rather new concept, and it's, if you may be critical, also a rather fuzzy concept. But in the end, today we have it laid down in the Global Biodiversity Framework, in the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, which was adopted at the COP15 in 2022. It was introduced in a rather comprehensive report by WWF in 2024. And there is, big initiative of many organizations worldwide, the Nature Positive Initiative, who first tried to make like a definition, saying that nature positive is like a global societal goal to halt and to reverse nature loss by 2030 and to achieve full recovery of nature by 2050. So this is a very high level of ambition. There is also this visualization, which you will find in this WWF report. It means, and it has a linkage for sure also to climate change Paris Agreement. It says, or it states, or it wishes to have zero net loss of nature and biodiversity from 2020, to get net positive by 2030, and to achieve full recovery by 2050. So this clearly admits that there will be further loss, but by providing measures which gain or improve nature, there should be a positive development within the next decades. If you have a critical look on that, you can say that the world obviously has not turned into the best since the last years. So there's a lot of work to do if we want to go into this direction. Very clear, this is all linked to the 2030 agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals. And if you have this mindset that the biosphere, that nature is the basis for society and for economy, then we are on the right track. But this is only like a notion, like an idea, and it has to be brought into economic practice. And that is the issue we are dealing with. And this picture, which comes from the WWF Global Roadmap for a Nature Positive Economy, shows that there is really a transformation needed if we want to reach or come into the track to achieve a nature positive development. Huge aspirations. We need data, we need metrics, we need the private capital markets, we need the financial institutions and trade. So this is like a global demand, a global challenge. The roadmap is good to have, but it needs to be filled with life. And that is what we are trying to approach now more and more, making it more and more concrete. This is what we have to do. There is another picture or scheme from the World Economic Forum, also dealing with this issue of nature positive economy. And they say There are three building blocks. The first one is to protect and restore natural capital assets. The second one is to enhance resource productivity. And the third one is to scale regenerative value chains. So protection, restoration, enhancing productivity, and scaling sustainable or regenerative value chains. This is what we have to do in very different systems, in the green and the blue ecosphere, in tourism markets. We have circular economy and so on. So this is still, again, theory. We need to go more and more into the direction of practice. This is another visualization. What are nature-based solutions? So the map is very comprehensive. There is a lot in. I think you know many of such activities. They reach from the oceans to the mountains, forestry, and the agricultural lands. But the question is, how do we get into action? Because when we have a look at our countries, the economies, we see that there is some pressure to act from the side of regulation. We have more and more regulatory requirements from side of the capital. Partially, investors or banks are more and more looking at issues of sustainability, biodiversity, but it's like also only like a niche. And when we look at the customers, it's also only a part, maybe a minor part, who has shifting demands and more demands into the direction of conserving biodiversity or working to cope with climate change. But, and this is maybe a very decisive thing, operational risks are coming up with climate change, with biodiversity loss. Because if your business model is threatened by these developments, then it is more likely that you as a business owner are thinking about new ways to cope with these challenges. Reputation is another thing. Greenwashing and issues like that are today more and more in the agenda. This can damage your reputation and lead to a loss of appeal of your business and your company. We are working, as it was said in the introduction, especially in Switzerland and the neighboring countries. So this is Germany and Austria. This is like an overview. Where are the areas of action in this region, the so-called DACH region, in terms of nature-based solutions and nature-positive economy? There is some action, especially in trying to develop nature-positive business models. I will talk on that later on. Nature-based measures like infrastructure, urban biodiversity, sponge city, and other issues are more and more also funded by state programs. So this is a very important thing, funding mechanisms. Also, the world of philanthropists and investors is important, but not always so transparent. But there is much money around, not so really often until now for these green issues, but there is a big potential there. And the regulation, as I said before, there's more and more regulation, which is not only easy for companies, but there's also the positive issue that from time to time, you have to be forced as a company to rethink your business model and the practice, which might cause damages to the environment and to the climate. So this is also rather a generic point of view. When we get even more to the world of practice, we see a lot of challenges in these concepts of nature-based solutions and nature-positive economy, starting with data availability. And in Switzerland, also in Austria, many companies are very small. Small and medium enterprises have rarely the resources for nature accounting or for quantifying their impacts. And if you want to go net positive, then you need data. And there we have a big gap. Then what's very clear, and everybody knows it, who is working in the field of biodiversity, it's a very complex, it's a very difficult to quantify issue. You need a lot of expertise, and you have to communicate it to decision makers in a way they understand. And these are two major challenges to be overcome. Then, even if there are, as I said before, more and more funding programs, the incentives are often not big enough. So you often need money, not always, but it often lacks. Then there is the issue that climate change, especially lost in relevance and political relevance within the last years. And this is a situation we have to deal with today. A few years ago, the situation was rather different. Climate change was rather high on the political agenda. But today, especially also when you're in business, this is rather something negatively connotated for many businesses. But there are still some, and hopefully we can try to help getting more and more of them into the direction of seeing the potentials which we have in climate change mitigation, adaptation, and also in nature-based solutions. But it's a difficult issue to incentivize. Scalability is the big issue and problem if you go into the direction of thinking in industrial terms. Many initiatives we are talking about, even those I will show you later on, are very small scale, are very local, and the means or also the mindset for going into the direction of scaling are not there. So many of these good issues or good projects stay in a very niche style or in a very low developed stage. So a large bundle of challenges. Interim conclusion. In a few pragmatic words, nature-based solutions and nature-positive economy won't work without the industry. If you want to go into the large areas and to scale, then we need to have the companies, the small, the big ones, worldwide. It must be profitable. You have to make money. It must be possible in a sustainable way, because if this doesn't work, then the industry won't cooperate. But when there is the chance and the opportunities and the approvals that there is opportunity and possibility to make money out of nature in a sustainable way and it's scalable, then the mindset shift begins. This now could all lead to the impression that we should wait and see, but then the big breakthrough will definitely not come. So better start small and try to make progress. And that's what we try to do. And now I'm coming to the examples. Starting with very, very small micro niche examples at the very beginning. We did a project in Switzerland 5 years ago, which was called the Green Business Incubator in cooperation with the Swiss nature parks. And the idea was to make an open innovation challenge, open for everyone, trying to ideate and prototype new products and services based on ecological infrastructure in the Swiss nature parks. So, for example, forests, plants, and so on. And we had more than 50 teams, which was surprising and was good. We had 10 winning teams, which were selected. They received the business coaching provided by the planval team. We do a lot of such business coachings, and this was a very first specific project where we had this green focus on green infrastructure. And 3 teams gained seed money, 5,000 Swiss francs, about $5,000 US. We worked with lean startups, so innovation methods very well. And on the right-hand side, you see a few products which came from this innovation challenge. Very small things, but good things. So the first one is soaps. In Switzerland, we have a lot of forests, and in one nature park, they had the idea, why don't we work with the waste when we do forest management, the pine needles? And well, it took some time, but now on the market, we have these beautiful soaps, which you can use in hotels, but also as a private person. So they're on the market. Then we have on the right-hand side juice from wild shrubs, something very, well, normal you could say, but for a small business in the north of Switzerland, this works quite well. And we have on the lower left-hand side, natural medicinal tinctures. So this is where people can book one day with a biologist in one of the nature parks, and they are going out in the landscape. They are gathering plants which are adequate for making tinctures for health reasons, and they take these products home with them in the evening. So small things, but they work. Another thing, and you see that we try with our formats, with innovation formats, either to foster innovation in these spheres of nature-based businesses in a very small scale way, or in this case, the Green Infrastructure Goes Business Award, we scouted existing products and services, and we tried, the winners there also received the business coaching to promote the further way. This award was implemented 3 times. It was for all the Alpine countries, so 8 countries, also including France, Italy, Slovenia, and the other ones I already mentioned before. Some examples from there. This is from Italy, and it shows that you can also make business from a very bad occasion, from a storm disaster, which hit the north of Italy in 2018, and it cut off millions of trees, firs in this case. And then some young creative minds, people from the region, took the chance and said, we make a business out of this. And what they did, they used the wood to make fancy stuff and use it in kind of a circular economy way. So they produced cubes, they call them cubes, which is like a speaker, a loudspeaker for your mobile phone. They started with a non-colored version, but today you can check out the website afterwards. They have now diversified their portfolio. They have colored ones, they have other stuff. And if you buy one, then they plant 1 tree. So this works very well. They have now already 200,000 trees planted. So they have sold 200,000 items, 1,000 tons of CO2 offset, and so on. So you see, it's very small scaled, 15 people working on that, but it works. And they are on the market now for almost 10 years. And they are in a small scale, I would say, expanding their business. So they have more products, they have more outreach, and it's a very positive experience they sell also to the people. Another winner from this Green Infrastructure Goes Business Award is this company called Helix. They are from Germany, south of Germany, and they are doing green facades. And we recognize that there is a rising demand, especially in Germany. Here in this case, you see the approach is, if there is new buildings, why not green them? In this case, it is in the city of Cologne. They have 2,000 square meters of greenery, and they were very keen on trying to have plants which are good for biodiversity. So they tested a lot with research together, and you see here that this is then a large greenery. If you work on such issues or examples like this parking garage. And there are co-benefits in terms of water and rainwater harvesting, etc. And it looks nice. So they are working and doing very well. More and more of such facades have to be greened, and they are doing a good promotional work. They're on the market, so they have something which really works. Then again, an example from Switzerland, which is more about infrastructure. This comes from the approach of a funding scheme. I have been working at the Swiss Federal Office for the Environment before I joined planval, and there we established a funding program for adaptation to climate change for cities, for municipalities, for regions. And this city of Sion, which is in the canton of Valais in the south of Switzerland, they took this opportunity. The picture you see on the left, this used to be parking place for cars. And they unsealed the surface and they developed green and blue infrastructure. So planting trees and having also these elements for kids there with water and so on. You have a better quality of life when it's hot, and there is often very dry and very hot. So it's nice to stay there when you have the green areas in the summer for younger, for elder people, for everyone. And they continued to work even when the project and the funding was over. And today they are like a lighthouse for urban planning in the light of climate change and climate change adaptation. And they, because the Urban Planning Institute and the officials and the politicians were very aware that this is the chance to make progress, they succeeded in institutionalizing climate change adaptation, greening, and then it gets very technical. But now they have these guides how to make urban planning now and in the future. And there are many people, or even at that point of time when we had this funding program, people were asking, where can I see an example in Switzerland of climate change adaptation in a city? And we sent all these people to Sion. And they are continuing. Now it's mainstream there, but in other cities it's not. But we have now an example there where you can see how it could work. And this is also important for business because all these installations, the plantings, the unsealings, etc., that's construction work or it's planning work. So this is jobs and mandates for businesses. Then a last example, maybe you know this plant. It's in Iceland. It has been installed by Climeworks, which is a Swiss startup or company. This is carbon capture and storage. And this is very important in terms of climate change for sure, but it's very expensive. It's very interesting for investors, this technological way of trying to solve our climate problem. We need it, that's for sure, but the cost-benefit ratio at the time being is, let's say, improvable. It has to improve, it's clear. What we try to do here in this project is nature-based climate action and carbon capture and storage by natural means. So in this case here, you see wetlands with agriculture, so-called paludiculture. I will tell you about that. The project is again in this DACH region, which is Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. This is a mandate of the Bavarian Environment Ministry. The background, the reason for the project is that there is not only a hypothesis, but it's clear that net zero can only be achieved when we have carbon removal, and that we have a big potential, especially here in this region with wetlands, forests, water bodies, and these potentials are barely tapped. We also see that local solutions are more and more needed, and there are not so many big projects where there is a clear impact in terms of climate change and biodiversity, where you can go and have a look what they are doing and what is the result. So some years before, when several companies sold climate or CO2 certificates, climate benefit certificates, not everything was working well. And one consequence was that companies or also organizations were looking for carbon credit projects which are more local or regional, not too far away, in order to monitor and in order to track the money they are investing, whether it raises the impact they need to have. So this project, which is still in a starting phase, tries to show and prove with test cases that you can make money with nature-based solutions, and that is scalable. But we have to start on a very, very low level. Also important in this case is it's not like a green project in the core. It's an economic project. We try with partners together to mobilize investors, to make them aware of the potentials, and also to mobilize companies, big companies and landowners. But again, we have to start very, very small. The case here I want to talk to you about is peatlands. So wetlands, which we have in Switzerland, but also Austria and especially in Germany to a large extent. Intact peatlands, they have very, very different functions, especially for climate protections, because they store CO2 and other emissions in the wet body in the ground. But the problem is that here in Germany, where we are working on this case, the peatlands are drained. Almost all of them are drained. And these are extensive surfaces. And when peatlands are drained, they emit all the CO2 and NH and etc. And then they get, or they work, or they act as a climate killer. They emit a lot, much too much. And this is the problem, especially with agriculture on drained peatlands. What can we do? There is a lot of research ongoing, especially in Germany, that when you re-wet these peatlands, that's known in vegetation ecology for decades, very positive from the ecologic point of view, peatland restoration, wetland restoration, but then it has no economic component, or not the one it could have. Paludiculture could be a solution, which means planting very specific species on re-wetted peatlands and harvesting them with special machines and bringing these biomass into industry. And then you have positive climate effects, positive biodiversity effects. And this is the hypothesis which has to be tested, scalable and economically very attractive. So there is some pictures from studies available, unfortunately, only in German, but it says that you can produce a lot from these paludiculture plants, like paper, cardboard, packaging material, building and insulation materials, wood-based materials, furniture. The percentage always shows the potentials for if you re-wet and use the German peatlands, how much you can get out of it in industrial terms. And this is now the example which we have implemented within the last 2 years as a first test case. So this prototype worked. It's a value chain with paludiculture in Bavaria. So we started with peatland, 9 hectares, which have been revetted before. It takes some years. Then there was reed canary grass, in German it's Rohrglanzgras, which has been risen there or grown there. This can be harvested with special machines, drying, and then we brought it into, after processing the fibers, into industry, medium industry, and they produced cardboard and sold it to Obi, which is a big do-it-yourself chain in Germany. So there at Obi, you can buy these cardboards and carry the plants you bought there to your home. This works. It needed money for sure from state funds to get it going, but the potential and calculations are still ongoing in economic terms. If you see the surface potential we have in Germany and also in other countries is enormous. And if we can reduce the costs in producing, then this economic potential could be like a very important leverage for nature-based solutions and nature-positive economy for these companies who are part of this value chain. But the value chain is start even with the services of farmers. It's rather complex. We are still at the very beginning, but last year this value chain received a prize, an award, the German Packaging Award in the category of sustainable packaging, which was already a very important signal for industry. One last thing, how we work in such projects. It's very important for us to work together on the local level with the actors and the industry. And this is hard work, it's tough work, but it's also fun when you go from ideation into the surfaces into production. And it's an innovation process with a lot of loops of iteration. The problem is always if it takes too long for industry to come on the market and to be cost efficient, then they do not want to continue. But we try to support and to get going with building up a network, because this is the core of this project, to try to build up a community from landowners over industry to political decision makers and investors. Then it could hopefully work. So I'm coming to the end. Like some final words before we start into discussion from my point of view. I think these concepts of nature-based solutions, they are there, but nature-positive economy, this is really a challenge, a big challenge for a lot of involved or concerned players on the whole world. And to bring it out of the niche, we need a lot. We need pioneers, we need people who have the fire, who have the engagement. We need the big projects. We need research. We need the knowledge. We need the conditions, funding. And what is very, very important from our point of view, more cooperation between these spheres or worlds of nature and economy. Because if we stick to these cliches that economy and nature, people or actors cannot cooperate, then we won't make progress. And I would like to end with 2 pictures. So often in these projects, we face such a situation. There are many actors on the field. They are not interacting with each other. They are separated. But what we would need is this. It's like an orchestra. Different people playing together. In this case, you see a symphonic orchestra with a rock band, and there is somebody like the orchestrator who tries to bring this into a creative mindset and in a good atmosphere to be productive. This is what we need. And now I'm looking forward to your questions and hopefully a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much for listening. And now please feel free to ask.
Thank you, Thomas, very much for this very kind of concrete presentation on how nature positive solutions can be conceived, implemented, thought about. It was very helpful for me. Let's open the floor up for questions. David Markosian was 5 minutes into the talk. His hand was up. Let me give you a chance to ask your question. Go ahead, David.
First of all, thank you very much for the interesting presentation. My question is, who do you think could be the orchestrator? And this question is related to the governance when it comes to the nature positive economy. Do you think that the orchestrator should be from the governance side, from the institutions, or from more bottom-up approach from local actors or people who are in the system but not on the top level of the governance? Thank you.
Thank you for this very important, crucial, but also difficult question. Our experience from these projects is that the orchestrator in the long term must be like a neutral institution who is on the market or which is on the market. Because we saw in several projects that the incentive for such initiatives can very well come, for example, from state actors, funding programs, municipalities. But in the end, when we are talking about your nature positive economy, if you are, as an actor, if you're not on the market, you're more working in the framework conditions, then you are not a partner or not on the same level of discussion or decision-making power as a company. And this was one experience we had in this project I presented at the end last year, where we tried as planval, as a small consulting company, to bring again such a value chain with peatlands and packaging industry getting going and trying to monetize our services. And the companies addressed said, well, you are a consulting company. We don't pay you for that. So I think in the long term, the orchestrator for these issues must be an organization, maybe newly funded, bottom up, but on the market.
Yeah, just ask a follow-up maybe. Sometimes the orchestration happens when regulations are changed. So do you see a role for regulatory environment incentives? And also removal of harmful incentives.
Yeah, it's the question about the contents of the regulation, but I have the impression that in these projects where we are working, because things are so complex, if you have a look at these peatland issue, then regulation could bring like an initial incentive, but it's, from my point of view, could not safeguard or be a basis for a long-term orchestration. Because if it's always, let's say, regulation for many companies is pressure or it's prohibition, but companies need to have like a positive connotation for these issues. So primitive terms, making money out of it in a sustainable way. They do not see the regulation as the right driver for such development. So I'm rather critical about regulation. We need it.
I don't necessarily mean regulation in a punitive way. It could be that it's an incentive. It gives you an incentive that you need to reduce your, let's say, a carbon footprint or your biodiversity footprint, whatever, by this much, and in return you get this kind of privilege or something like that. So
This for sure, yeah. But the discussion we see here in Western Europe with all these, yeah, there are many incentives. But when we really see or try to have a focus on going net zero and making carbon removal, we have not so many companies, even here in Western Europe, who have a concrete climate reduction or removal goal. And those we talked to within the last years who have such a goal or net zero goal for 2040 or 45, they are again now in a volatile market situation, global markets, where they say, we are not sure whether we can keep up these goals for the next 10, 15 years, and they do not even think about carbon removal. They are trying to reduce and avoid emissions, that's clear, but carbon removal, the last 10 or 20% to going net zero, they have no solution. So with incentives from regulation, we could prepare business models, but they have to pay off. And it's really difficult. But in the end, we have to work in this direction, even if it's very, very new and also often disappointing when things don't work. But in the end, without carbon removal and the industry, we won't succeed in terms of climate mitigation and net zero.
thank you. David, any follow-up questions?
No, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else with questions? Alexander, very good to see you here. I don't know if you're still with us. From there, he's in Geneva, so close to you. And Garabet, do you have anything to say? I'm putting people on the spot, sorry. Garabet, the floor is yours.
Yeah, you can answer this question because it has a bit of a scientific background to it. But I'm interested with regards to the last project you described with peatlands. Have there been any studies involved in seeing the carbon emissions coming from the peatlands after rewetting and after harvest? Because this is kind of a delicate matter, a sensitive matter, when the ecosystems are shuffled or transformed from one state to the other. There might be a release of a lot of carbon dioxide, which were kind of stored in the system over decades. And I'm kind of familiar with the situation in Germany because I did my PhD research in Uckermark, where there's a lot of peatland as well, and I know the dry wetting issues. So that's why I'm asking what were the studies that were done before this was marketed or taken into a business?
I'm not sure if I grasped everything because of acoustic reasons, but as I understood, you were asking about the emissions from peatlands which have been rewetted and working with paludiculture, right?
But your sound quality was very choppy and very hard to hear. So if you could write down your question and email it to us, just in a statement, just one statement, I think it will be better. In the meantime, I'll give the floor to Ivana. Ivana, please. Hold on, let me give you. Go ahead, Ivana. Can you hear us? We can't hear you, Ivana Mijatovic. Go ahead, Ivana.
Is it okay now? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
So I had to unmute it on my side as well. So thank you so much for this very, very interesting presentation, because I heard that you are also working with EU member states. So for me, it would be like quite interesting to hear whether you're actually using, or whether member states have been using, climate adapt tool from the European Environment Agency, which also kind of has quite a lot of resources on examples, and so on also scalability of these projects. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for this question. I worked for 10 years in Germany. I am German, and I had many of my projects when I was working in Germany in European funding programs. Climate Adapt was not in place then, but there were different interregional programs, Horizon, or it was a framework research program then. And in the EU member states, there is a lot of work since decades in the field of climate change and also nature-based solutions from funding programs. And there is great results and projects, big projects, which would have not been possible without these funding programs. Switzerland is not, or only partially, a member of these issues. And it's also interesting to follow on these questions from the political debate, because in the EU, nature-based solutions was an issue even 15 years ago. In Switzerland, we have a strategy on biodiversity, and there only last year in the action plan for this strategy on biodiversity, the term nature-based solutions came up. But in the end, measures are often known or have been known before. But basically, there are a lot of players and actors who are experts, total professionals in fundraising from the EU programs. This is very good, but it's also, if you want to have a little critical side on this, these are bubbles of actors. So you get one project after the other from EU-funded mechanisms, insights and the results very good, but the transfer of results out of your bubble to, let's say, the real world or the world outside or the actors on the ground often doesn't work. So it's two perspectives on that. But these programs are fundamental. That's clear.
Yeah, I was really more interested, how all of that knowledge or resources is actually transferable to, other places, because my impression is also that quite a lot of that knowledge, experience, and really great projects are kind of lost, somewhere, on the website, somewhere, in a small community, and really we just don't get enough information about it, and people are just not using all of that.
I totally agree. And well, this is known to the world of project people ever since, that knowledge transfer, technology transfer is not always planned in the project, and it should be from the very beginning. And there, what is also missing is like hubs for specific issues. We have a lot of hubs, but in this case, what we see, and we know this now very well from this example from the peatlands, many results are transferable, I would say more or less 100% to other areas. But who cares for this knowledge exchange? There is also competition between the projects and between the organizations who are implementing these projects and who want to have like also the power on knowledge transfer with them. And it's rather a paradoxon. We were working here in Germany with this peatland, or we are working in Germany, and there is like a battle between the southern part of Germany and the northern part of Germany. There are the peatlands geographically, but there are different research institutions, and the north is more progress than the south. And now they do not exchange as they should do if you want to have impact-oriented work, neutral. I very well understand as a company that there is also a challenge between research institutions or knowledge transfer institutions. But in terms of making progress everywhere, this is also like an obstacle.
Thank you. Ivan, if we could just thank you very much for the very good question. Alexander, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues, for organizing this interesting presentation. Thank you, Thomas, for the inspiring talk. I work for the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, and we are running a project in Eastern Europe, Caucasus, and Central Asia now. And actually, nature-based solutions is a focus for our projects. For example, in Central Asia and Kyrgyzstan, we are initiating new nature-based solutions, sites, projects, activities related to artificial glaciers, restoration activities, agroforestry, sustainable pasture management. So this is what we are doing, and we are seeing great support from local communities, local NGOs, as well as government. How do we make the next step and connect these activities towards, or move these activities towards the nature positive path? Who should be our first kind of point of contact to link it to the economy more? Is it local actors, farmers? Is it easier on the governmental side, or should we approach financial institutions, for example? If you could share your experience, might be helpful for us. Thank you.
Thank you for this question. I cannot easily answer, but what I know is that in the project I presented at the end, as I said before, concerning the role of the orchestrator, I think it's the same with knowledge, or with making more progress with the knowledge which is around, or scaling. You have to be on the market. For companies, they, even if they know that there would be like a national or international platform on nature-based solutions, there are some, but they don't work with it. If they have like a knowledge broker or somebody who's like a company himself in the value chain, and they say, hey, here we have examples, or let's connect with these actors, or they have these projects, that's very different. So maybe in the end, there are so many solutions and projects around, be it in nature-based solutions or now nature-positive economy. That's such a complex issue. Maybe you need, like, on the international level, an organization, and this could be very well a UN organization, but you need to have vertical interlinkages to the industry, to companies, to economy on the ground, maybe via the national levels, maybe with the universities. It's also different between the countries. So let's say, who do you trust, or from who do you want to receive information? Who do you want to work with? And so we have different, really, it's like bubbles. When we worked with these companies, like the packaging company, you need not only one or two or three workshops or talks or physical meetings with them so that they trust you. It needs much more. And we know from many other projects that if you have online resources, you have digital knowledge hubs, that's good, but it's only for a very specific group of people who use it. And if you want to be critical about using public money, we had very different issue last week, a meeting about climate change adaptation measures in Alpine areas. And we had an exchange. I was there from the side of the FORACCA project, where we are for Armenia trying to make or co-create with communities climate resilience. And there are many other issues or projects worldwide. And they, the other people we met, have a platform. And they did not know us, and we did not know them. And how to bring it together, it's very complicated. But yeah, I think we could spend a whole workshop on this. But on the market side or the company side, I think you really need local or regional platforms with people who speak the language of economy. And you need really trust, and you need a long time. And it must be profitable. If we do not succeed in making things profitable in the industrial way, then they won't work. One last word about that, the peatland issue. We had many talks with different sizes of companies who could produce things with biomass from peatlands. But when they heard about pricing at current times, then they said, we see no way in making contracts with producers in Germany. Even if they would be interested in producing with paludiculture biomass, they said, if we believe in this business case, we go to the east. And we had one case, one company also in Cologne, and they said, well, we are now checking the market in the Ukraine. So this is then like geopolitics. But you see, I cannot answer your question. It's fundamental. I would be keen on exchanging maybe afterwards. Maybe we can also have like synergies between what we are doing here, Switzerland, Europe, and what you are doing in Caucasus area or in Armenia, because we see much potential there.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. Yeah, I know it needs additional discussion and more conversations. Where are you based in Switzerland? Is it far
Bern.
from Geneva? Bern. Okay, it's not that far. Maybe we invite you to visit us in Geneva one day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. And Garabet's question, I know we're over time. He was asking about studies done on the impacts of rewetting and cultivating the peatlands in terms of carbon emissions, specifically related to carbon stored in the peat over long periods of time, decades. So I guess the question here, if Garabet, if I understand correctly, is are there risks associated with these?
As far as we know, you need to have a long-term monitoring on these effects, because rewetting and usage in terms like the paludiculture is rather new. Rewetting of peatlands, they are studies, and there is that in Germany there are two big research institutions or consortia dealing with this issue. I will provide you the contacts with these pictures I showed you on the presentation with the visualization of the peatland issue is from the Greifswald Moorzentrum, which is in the north of Germany, and there is the Peatland Science Center in the south of Germany. I could connect you with them, but in the end, it's site-specific, and it needs long-term monitoring to make really serious and valuable statements about that.
Okay, Garabet, if you want to follow up, we can maybe do it online. We have email connection with Thomas, and Garabet is our freshwater ecologist, so at the Ecopia Center. So these are the topics that he's very much interested in. Anyone else? Any final thoughts, questions before we sign off? I see no hands. Well, Thomas, thank you very much for this very stimulating talk, bringing us down to the ground and thinking very seriously about how to make things happen on the ground. And Dominic, again, thank you very much to WSL and the collaboration we have with each other. I don't know, Dominic, if you want to have any final words. Do you want to say anything or?
Thank you, Alan. Just also thank you very much both to yourself and your colleagues for setting this up, and to Thomas once again for giving this very interesting presentation. And of course, to all our participants for your interest. I hope it was as interesting for you as it was for me, and I hope we'll see some of you again for the next talk in the series.
Just for everyone's information, this talk series will continue. This year, we're devoted the talks to biodiversity, given COP17 is taking place in Armenia. But in the subsequent years, year or two, that we'll continue to have these talk series, we'll probably focus on issues like forestation, forests, climate change issues, with some nexus to biodiversity as well. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank
you.